Today we mourn and give thanks for the true patriot who lies in the rotunda. The Senate and the entire country send our deepest condolences to Officer Sicknick's family and all who loved him. His name will never be forgotten.
He has been forgotten by Mitch McConnell and Republican senators. Mitch McConnell is now blocking an investigation into what happened to Brian Sicknick when he engaged in hand-to-hand combat on January 6th, suffered 2 strokes, and died the next day. Mitch McConnell plans to use a procedural vote in the Senate to block a bill establishing a bipartisan January 6th investigative commission. Officer Brian Sicknick's mother, Gladys Sicknick, has sent a statement to Mitch McConnell and every Republican member of the Senate asking them to meet with her to explain their opposition to a January 6th commission. In her statement to Republican senators, Gladys Sicknick says that her son, quote, died because of the insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol building on January 6th. Gladys Sicknick said that her son fought for hours and hours against those animals who were trying to take over the Capitol building and our democracy as we know it. Not having a January 6th commission to look into exactly what occurred is a slap in the faces of all the officers who did their jobs that day. Because of what they did, the people in the building were able to go home that evening and be with their families. Brian and many other officers ended up in the hospital. I suggest that all congressmen and senators who are against this bill visit my son's grave in Arlington National Cemetery and, while there, think about what their hurtful decisions will do to those officers who will be there for them going forward. Joining our discussion now, Maria Teresa Kumar, President and CEO of Voto Latino and an MSNBC contributor. Also with us, Aisha Mills, Democratic strategist and host of BNC News. And Maria Teresa, Mitch McConnell said he would never forget. It seems like he has forgotten.
Once again, Mitch McConnell says nice things on the floor of the Senate, but does it with empty words and without action. And what I find the most tragic is that Officer Sicknick, died doing his duty to protect Mitch McConnell and to protect every single person in that building. He was doing his job, and for the Senate leadership not to ask for an investigation of something that was so against the history of America, and to do it in a way that is a slap in the face for those people who lost their lives that day and who is trying to safeguard our democracy, is not only a slap in the face to that family but to the American people, because his job was to protect Mitch McConnell, and Mitch McConnell basically is turning his back on trying to find out the truth.
And apparently turning his back on Brian Sicknick's mother, Aisha. Gladys Sicknick said this, putting politics aside, wouldn't they want to know the truth of what happened on January 6th? If not, they do not deserve to have the jobs they were elected to do. Aisha, I just can't imagine how that conversation would go between Gladys Sicknick and a Republican member of the Senate who is opposed to this commission.
Me either. And I'm just so curious to see who would actually take her up on having those real conversations. Because here's the thing, we have to just kind of take a minute to think about, like, what is democracy as we talk about this whole anti-democratic, wave of this imagination of the Republican Party. They weren't always this, but they are this today. And the truth is that our democracy is a system that is set up under mutually agreed upon rules where rivals compete, but ultimately compete within a system of shared and agreed upon rules. That's not what's happening anymore. You have a Republican Party that essentially, instead of seeing the opposition as, rivals under the same system, they see Democrats and people who share Democrats' vision and ideals and want accountability in the Democrats in the same way the Democrats do. They see them as mortal rivals and a threat in a way that they want to stomp them out, as opposed to participate in a mutually agreed upon process to get down to some answers and to really legislate. Here's the thing that makes that so difficult is when you have a party that sees the opposition as something to stomp out, there's nowhere to go with that. There's really no system anymore. There's nothing to participate around. And so, I think that, they're all going to shun this man's mother, because how could they sit and have a conversation with her actually no longer believe exists or wants to participate in. And the last thing that I'll say briefly about this is that I always want us to remember that this rush towards, kind of eroding our democracy always begins and ends with race. At the end of the day, the greatest predictor for this kind of anti-democratic viewpoint that the Republicans have now is always going to be about racial animus. And, you say it in a lot of different ways, but that's what it comes down to. And so forced to actually participate in a system that gets down to answers around this insurrection is going to be a reckoning on a whole lot of nasty underbelly of views that the party has that they don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. And so here we are where they want to do nothing and to not participate. And it's just really unfortunate and such a breakdown and frustrating.